If Congress doesn't pass a new COVID relief bill by the end of the month, 30 million Americans will lose the increased unemployment benefits they've been counting on. It could be catastrophic for people already struggling to pay their bills, including things like rent and mortgage payments. 30 million Americans already missed their housing payments in full or in part in June. 32 million missed payments in July. Those numbers, they could get worse. States, they've enacted foreclosure and eviction moratoriums, but they're starting to expire next month, so the situation, it is not good, and as they say, the clock is ticking. Congress, they're in session, and each side is cobbling together a plan, but there's a lot of daylight between Democrats and Republicans, but also, it should be noted, between Republicans and the president. Now, the White House, they're pushing for a payroll tax cuts, but Republicans don't apparently have much of an appetite for that. Also, GOP lawmakers want to give the states money for COVID testing, but inexplicably, the White House is opposed to funding for testing. However, it may be cracking and agree to it now, or so we hope. Mitch McConnell's Senate bill includes that cash for testing, money to help schools reopen, payroll protection loans for small businesses, and stimulus checks for individuals. But Democrats, they want more, including a bigger price tag than the roughly $1 trillion Republican proposal. Speaker Pelosi, she's also pushing for extending the jobless benefits, but there is resistance to that across the aisle. We're going to be following this story all week, including on Thursday when Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey will join us. But I want to bring in our next guest, Congressman Josh Gottheimer. He also a Democrat from the Garden State, and he serves on the House Financial Services Committee. And Congressman, just tell me this is typical, dragging it out to the 11th hour, or is there really a chance that insanity will rule the day and we're going to literally kick millions of Americans in a pandemic potentially out of their houses?
We're going to get something done. As you just pointed out rightly with your introduction, we're apart on different issues, but on the fundamentals, the understanding that we've got to do something and you can't just kick people off and leave them on the side of the road here, especially during a pandemic and this, you've got a health crisis, you've got an economic crisis. And as a result, we've got to make sure people can put food on the table. And it's a lot of anxiety for people. It's a lot for people to go through. Right now, we really need to stand by families and Americans. And I'm confident we're going to get something done. It may take to the last minute, but we'll get something done.
Okay, obviously I want you to be right, but today the Trump administration said this aid package, it should be focused on kids, jobs, and vaccines. Now, I must have missed something because this week I've heard the White House say, schools, you don't reopen, we're going to cut off your federal funding. Even in the states hit hardest, they want them open fully without conditions and right away. I don't know how that helps kids. And I noticed they talk about vaccines, but who in their right mind thinks cutting off funding for testing and tracing again in the worst part of the pandemic makes any sense? Tell me that's going to be in the final version.
I really believe that's going to be in the final version. You hear, as you said, the Republicans are disagreeing with each other about a lot of what's coming out of the White House versus Capitol Hill. So there's a huge disagreement there. They're closer to where I think we are. And I believe that's why I really believe we'll get there. We'll put a package together. We'll send it to the president and he'll sign it. We've got a lot of businesses that are hurting, and that's a lot of jobs, businesses of all sizes. And you look at our small businesses in New Jersey, about a quarter of the restaurants have closed down. And not to mention what's happened to so many other businesses and the jobs that go with it. And we know that in the fall, we could be facing, another outbreak here, another surge. So we need to be prepared. We need to make sure that we keep testing up. I was on the phone today with two of the major labs because we're so backlogged, 7 to 10 days turnaround time now for tests. And that's a huge problem. If you want to make sure you do the contact tracing and know that you're testing and get ahead of it, people can't wait 7 days or more for results of their test.
You mentioned the biggest nurses union in New Jersey. Their word was, I think, we feel disposable because they don't have the PPE. And I think people watching this in different parts of the country say, oh, wait, I figured that might be going on in places like Texas or, in Florida, harder hit states. But even in Jersey, they're worried about the PPE. To that point, in the testing backlogs in some places longer than 2 weeks, doesn't the federal government have to be the agent here that's going to basically mandate for the mass production of this, or even, commandeer some labs here to do more testing? I know the president doesn't like testing, but can this really all be solved here or there in the private sector? It doesn't have the government to basically say, no, we're finally going to do this the right way, and we're going to use the power of the government to ensure we can test efficiently and churn out this PPE. God forbid we need it in the fall.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, many of us have said since day one that this has to be coordinated federally, right? Because you can't say to every state and to every governor, every man or woman for himself and herself, like, just go out there and it's your problem, right? That's not the way you solve something of this size. We have obviously incredible health experts nationally at NIH and CDC and other people whose job it is to understand what we need to do. So you can't say to every state, you're on your own here. And of course, I've been pushing very hard and concerned about having enough needles and syringes for when we have a vaccine. There are a lot of pieces here that need to be driven federally, working with the states, working in coordination, not having the states compete with each other and work against each other. That makes no sense whatsoever.
One phrase I didn't mention, but I know was also a dividing point, was limited liability. And that's a fancy way of saying that Republicans right now want corporations, companies not to be held accountable if their employees come back and they get sick. This one, I can understand arguments from both sides to a certain degree. But you can have irresponsible companies that don't have the necessary mitigation. Employees come back and they get sick. You can even apply it to schools, et cetera. So my point is there a middle ground you can find here where if people make full faith and best efforts, they won't be sued at the end, but at the same time not letting people act irresponsibly when they reopen their doors?
You just put that perfectly. That's exactly the place you have to land on. You know, we need to make sure whether you're a frontline worker, a first responder, or a business that wants people to come back to work and keep people employed, that they're protected if they take the steps that are necessary. And, you know, you need to set these national guidelines and put them out there and say, here's what you need to do for people to go back to work safely. And presuming they do it, we need to make sure that there's certain safe harbor protections, not for everything. And not, you know, the key is you got to make sure you do this in a smart way. And as you pointed out, how you write it and what you require of people to and of businesses, the steps to put in place is important. But I think we will ultimately land on some protections. Right now, that's an area where we're pretty far apart, and we're going to have to keep working it until we get there.
Last, Congressman, you led off with an optimistic tone that we're going to get a deal done, and Lord knows I want you to be right. But today, Liz Cheney, who I hardly think is called, you know, queen of the liberal movement in this country, she's getting pushed by members of her own party to be removed as Republican, basically conference chair because she supports Anthony Fauci. What level of crazy is going on behind closed doors where if you support Anthony Fauci, somehow you're being disloyal to a party platform? Tell me this is the fringe, not more folks than we imagine who believe this.
I mean, I spoke to a lot of my friends on the other side of the aisle this afternoon. That's the fringe and, you know, listen, we know the extremists say things all the time that I scratch my head and say, how could you not listen to Fauci? How could you not take the advice of scientists? How could you not follow evidence-based decisions? How could you not wear a mask? I mean, there's lots of things that I don't really understand that seem pretty basic, that you want to look out for others. You want to, you know, flatten the curve and stay safe. And I'm just hoping, and if you look at the numbers, more and more people now are saying, okay, I'll put a mask on and doing the right thing. And I think, listen, Mr. Fauci has been saying that for a long time. We've got to listen to the people who are the doctors, who are the scientists, who make these decisions based on science. And we'll get there. And I will finish with an optimistic tone that we will. And whether you're talking about changes that still need to happen in nursing homes, and I've been a huge proponent of that legislation to make sure that nursing homes are prepared for another wave, that they've got the PPE, that they've make sure that they actually call families when there's a problem, they report to the CDC, and they have crisis plans in place. There are things we've learned. The question now is, are we going to implement them? Or are we going to go back in Groundhog Day and make the same mistakes again?
Yeah, well, let's hope that we don't make things worse here and not let the folks leave Washington without legislation. But I take it that you believe we're going to get it done. I sure hope you're right. Congressman Gottheimer, thank you and good luck.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, when we come back, the infectious disease expert who says the COVID outbreak could actually get worse if DC doesn't do more to stop it. And trust me, the guy's the foremost expert on the last major pandemic from 1918. He sees a lot of peril. Stay with us.